Welcome back to our statistics learning session. Today, we'll be discussing about one-sided versus two-sided test. What is what is one-sided test? One-sided test is when we test something is larger than something. Like for example, let me write it down so that we can see what is that. One-sided. For one-sided test, the H naught would be x is smaller or equal to 30, while alternate hypothesis would be mean is greater than 30. This is an example of one-sided test. In one-sided test, we are just trying to see if something is below or above some value. In null hypothesis, it can be either below or above, and in alternate hypothesis, it can be exactly opposite case. It will be it usually covers these are usually mutually exclusive and complementary. These are usually mutually exclusive and complementary. Another one we have is two-sided hypothesis. In two-sided hypothesis, we are trying to see whether something is equal to something or not. Like for example, in a fair coin flip, we're trying to see whether the P is equal to half or it's not. In two-sided hypothesis, we don't have a priori reason to believe that the thing will go either way in doing experimentation or result of experimentation. We do not have any a priori knowledge of that. This is called two-sided hypothesis. Two-sided hypothesis is usually a singleton. That is, the null hypothesis is usually a singleton. That means the it is mean or theta is just a one single value, while alternate hypothesis can be either below theta or above theta, and we don't have any prior knowledge of that. We are trying to discover something, whether something exists, but we don't have prior knowledge what it is or what it can be. Now, let's deal with some examples we have discussed earlier and classify them whether they are one-sided or two-sided. Starting with boarding example. Is it one-sided or two-sided? What do you think? That's right. It is one-sided test because we are trying to test whether Wilma is greater than something, is better than something. So it is one-sided test. And how about waiting time in ER? Is it one-sided or two-sided? What do you think? The waiting time in ER is one-sided again because Here we are trying to see whether Plainsboro Hospital has waiting time greater than 30 minutes. 30 minutes is a national average, and here we are trying to see whether Plainsboro Hospital is has waiting time greater than 30 minutes. That's what we are seeing. Now, here's let me give you a two-sided version of this test. The two-sided version would be Plainsboro Hospital in national average is equal to 30, and truly we are trying to see whether it is different than national average. The alternate hypothesis would be mean is not equal to 30. Here the question would be, is Plainsboro Hospital truly different than national average? That's what we are trying to question. That's what we're trying testing. That's the question we are trying to answer. Moving on to next example, KISS example. Is this one-sided or two-sided? This is two-sided. It is two-sided because here we are trying to see whether people have preference for either kissing at the left side or right side of the cheek. We don't have prior knowledge about whether they have preference in one side or either side. So here the null hypothesis would be half, and alternate hypothesis would be not equal to half. We don't have prior knowledge whether it's left side or right side. On average, it is half. That's what we assume, and we don't have an null hypothesis whether we don't have prior knowledge whether it can be left side of the cheek or right side of the cheek. So that's the KISS example, and it's going to be a two-sided test. How about fair coin? Is fair coin one-sided test or two-sided test? Fair coin is also a two-sided test because what we are doing here, we are testing whether we are assuming that the cone is fair. That means the mu is equal to half, and if it's unfair coin, the alternate hypothesis is the mu is not equal to half. Whether it can be less than half or more than half, we don't know yet. But we are only concerned about whether it's fair or not. We have to discover something. That's why it's a two-sided test. One-sided test or two-sided test will have different rejection regions. That's for sure. And one thing really important to remember is if you have a two-sided test, then absolute value, you are going to test for absolute value, but in one-sided test, you are not testing for absolute value of Tn. Tn will not have absolute value. Absolute value for two-sided, and Tn will not have absolute value for one-sided. Let me quickly summarize what we discussed today. We discussed about one-sided test and two-sided test. We talked about how they are different, and we went through a few examples like boarding method, waiting time in ER, KISS example, fair coin, and classify them whether they are one-sided or two-sided. That's for today. I will see you in next learning session. Thank you so much.